Asterisk, asterisk. The rain came down in sheets on the empty highway just before midnight. A silver sedan sat dead in the fast lane, its hazard lights blinking with the faint, desperate rhythm of a pulse running out. Inside, a woman pressed both hands against her swollen belly, her breath coming in shallow bursts, each exhale a barely contained sound of panic, because the pain arriving now was never supposed to arrive tonight. Cars blurred past in the darkness, their headlights sweeping across her windshield and vanishing. Not one slowed, not one stopped. Then, from a small roadside garage at the edge of the highway shoulder, a man in an oil-stained jacket stepped into the storm. He had no idea who she was, but the decision he made in the next 10 minutes would change the course of both their lives forever. Asterisk, asterisk. What would you do if one choice made in the rain, in the dark, with everything to lose was the only thing standing between two lives and disaster? Caleb Turner had been fixing other people's broken things since before he could legally drive. That was simply the truth of him. His earliest memory of the garage, his father's garage, back then, before it became his, was the smell of motor oil on a cold morning, the way it mixed with coffee, and rust, and something unnameable that felt, to a child, like safety. That smell never left him. At 34, Caleb owned and operated Turner's Auto Repair, a single-bay operation squeezed between a shuttered diner and a chain-link fence on the outskirts of Clarkfield, a drowsy suburb that existed mostly as a pause between one part of the highway and another. The building was old, the sign above the entrance hand-painted in block letters. The red paint, now faded to a dull rust orange, had not been updated in 11 years, because Caleb kept meaning to get around to it and kept getting distracted by actual work. There were no employees. There was no waiting room, just a single plastic chair near the entrance and a 3-year-old calendar on the wall that someone had once given him as a joke and that had somehow remained there ever since. His tools were organized with the kind of discipline that surprised people who judged him by the state of his jacket. Every wrench in its row, every socket on its peg. His workspace was a paradox, a man who looked like disorder and worked like precision. The jacket was the problem, as far as first impressions went. It was an old canvas field jacket, gray-green, stained in the particular way that only years of honest work can stain something. Caleb wore it every day, in every season, and it had long since become something more than clothing. It was a second skin, a symbol to those who noticed symbols of a man who had not had the time or inclination to consider how he appeared to others. Most of his customers noticed it immediately, and most of them drew the same conclusion. This man was not to be fully trusted. That conclusion was wrong, and most of them figured that out eventually. But the doubt followed him like weather. He had started community college at 22 with a genuine intention of completing a degree in mechanical engineering. He had been good at it, better than good. His instructor had told him during his first semester, the kind of instinct for systems that couldn't be taught. But instinct couldn't pay for a funeral, and it couldn't raise a child. When his wife, Maya, died of a cardiac event at 25, sudden, unexplained, the kind of thing that was not supposed to happen to people who were 25, Caleb had withdrawn from school within the same week, driven home, and never gone back. Ella was 11 months old. She was 6 now, living most of the week with Maya's mother, Dottie, in the small house 3 blocks from the garage. Caleb saw her every day, picking her up after school, fixing her dinner on the nights he knocked off early enough, reading to her until she fell asleep before he drove back to close up the shop. She had Maya's eyes, that particular shade of brown that caught light and held it, and she had Caleb's stubbornness, which delighted and exhausted him in equal measure. People in Clarkfield knew who Caleb was the way they knew the name of a street they had driven down 100 times without thinking about. He was there. He fixed things. He charged fair rates and sometimes didn't charge at all when the person across the counter was clearly in worse shape than he was. He did not talk much in the way that people expected talking, no small talk, no reassurances designed to fill silence. He answered questions directly and said very little else. Some people found this unsettling. Others eventually came to understand that it was simply a form of respect. He had no interest in performing ease. The town had its opinion of him. It was gentle and dismissive in equal measure, the kind of opinion that said, well, he is what he is. Good enough, nothing remarkable. A fixture, a handyman with a shop. Caleb Turner had stopped caring about that opinion a long time ago. He was there to do the work, to raise his daughter, and to keep the lights on. That was the whole of it. That was, at least, what he believed on the night the rain started. Sophia Bennett had not slept more than 4 hours in a row in 2 weeks. This was not an exaggeration. She had tracked it, because she tracked everything, because the habit of measurement was so deeply embedded in her professional life that it had colonized the rest of her existence, almost without her noticing. She was 38 years old, 7 months pregnant, and the CEO of Bennett Technologies, a mid-sized but rapidly expanding data infrastructure firm that had spent the last 18 months in the middle of an acquisition process significant enough to appear in the financial press. The stress of those 18 months had been the particular kind of chronic, grinding pressure that you didn't notice building until you realized, quite suddenly, that you had been operating at the absolute limit of your capacity for so long that you had forgotten what normal felt like. Tonight, she had made a decision that her assistant would describe, in conversation with colleagues the following morning, as completely unlike her. She had left the office at 9:45 in the evening without telling anyone where she was going, rejected the offer of her usual car service, gotten into her own vehicle, a silver late-model sedan, and driven onto the highway heading west. She had told herself it was just air, that she needed to drive, to move, to be in motion without an agenda or a destination, just for an hour. The baby had been restless all day, shifting in ways that pressed against her lower back with a persistence that felt pointed, as if making a comment she was not yet willing to hear. The missed calls on her phone were from a board director named Gerald Walsh, who had been trying to reach her since 7 in the evening regarding a clause in the acquisition agreement that had become unexpectedly contentious. She had seen his name flash across the screen 3 times and silenced it 3 times. On the passenger seat lay a manila folder thick with contract pages and a bound report she had been carrying back and forth between the office and her apartment for 6 days without opening it. Sophia was not the kind of person who ran from problems. Her entire professional reputation was built on exactly the opposite, the deliberate, almost unsettling calm she maintained in the middle of crisis, the way she walked into difficult conversations without apparent anxiety and emerged from them having somehow changed the shape of the thing. Her board liked this about her, mostly. Her competitors found it unnerving. Her ex-husband had, near the end of their marriage, told her that it made it very hard to know when she needed something. And she had sat with that for a moment, and then said she would think about it, which had not been the right answer. But tonight, the rain beginning to streak across the windshield, the highway opening up and emptying out, the hum of the car surrounding her, and something close to peace she felt, for the first time in weeks, that she might actually be able to breathe. She was thinking about breathing, in fact, when the dashboard lit up. The warning appeared as a cluster of orange symbols, the kind of alert that a driver who paid attention to maintenance schedules would have caught weeks earlier. Sophia paid attention to many things. The maintenance schedule on her personal vehicle was not among them. She registered the symbols with the same initial calm she brought to everything. Then the engine began to stutter. It was subtle at first, a slight hesitation in the acceleration, a tremor in the steering wheel that resolved immediately, and then returned. She reduced her speed instinctively, moving toward the right lane. The rain had intensified in the last 10 minutes, sheeting across the road in gusts that pushed the car sideways in small, alarming increments. Her windshield wipers were running at maximum and barely managing. Then the engine cut out entirely. There was no gradual winding down. It simply stopped power steering, vanishing with it. The dashboard going dark except for the warning lights. The car coasting with the helpless, drifting inertia of something no longer in control of itself. Sophia gripped the wheel and steered with the last of her momentum toward the shoulder. She made it partially the front of the car, clearing the lane, the rear still exposed. Hazard lights beginning to flash with the thin, automated determination of a system that had lost everything except that one last function. She sat for a moment in the silence that followed. Outside, a truck thundered past close enough that the car rocked in the wake. Then another. The rain hammered the roof in a sound like static. She picked up her phone. The cell signal showed 1 bar, flickering. She tried 911. It connected after a delay, dropped, connected again. She managed to give her location before the call broke apart. She tried again and got nothing. Then the pain arrived. It was not the discomfort she had been managing for weeks, the back pressure, the rib ache, the general systemic exhaustion of a body carrying more weight and more stress than it was designed for simultaneously. This was different in the way that a fire alarm is different from a smoke detector. Sudden, absolute. It moved through her lower abdomen with a force that emptied her lungs and left her gripping the steering wheel with both hands. her knuckles white. Her breathing stopped for 2 full seconds before it resumed in a gasp. She knew immediately what it was. She was not a person who misread data. The contractions came at 27 minutes. Then 22. Then, as she sat in the rain on the shoulder of the highway, with cars passing in the dark, without slowing at 15, she had read every relevant book. She knew what 15 minutes meant. She also knew that she was at least 12 miles from the nearest hospital, and that her phone was now producing no signal at all. The hazard lights blinked their weak, methodical rhythm into the storm. She tried to slow her breathing. She tried to think. Both were harder than they had ever been. Caleb had not planned to still be at the garage at 11:50 on a Thursday night. He had planned, as he often planned and often failed to execute, to close at 9, go get Ella from Dottie's, sit with her for 20 minutes before she fell asleep, and then come home to a meal he had already prepped and a few hours of something that approximated rest. What had happened instead was a vintage truck that had been towed in at 8:30 with an electrical fault that turned out to be a cascading relay failure of the particular kind that, once you started pulling at the thread, revealed more thread. He had been pulling thread ever since. He was crouched under the hood, with a diagnostic light clenched between his teeth, when he heard the second truck on the highway. Not unusual, but there was something in the way the sound distributed the braking, the wide arc, the gap in traffic following that pulled his attention, the way sounds sometimes did when they carried, meaning he couldn't name yet. He stood, walked to the edge of his lot, where the chain link ended and the highway shoulder began. The rain was heavy and cold. He could see, maybe 40 meters up the road, the amber pulse of hazard lights. A silver car. Sitting wrong too far into the lane, not fully clear. A truck had just gone around it. There would be more trucks. Caleb stood there for approximately 5 seconds. He ran the same calculation most people run in that kind of moment, the accounting of inconvenience, danger, time, obligation, probability of help arriving from somewhere better positioned. He was wet within 2 seconds of standing in the rain without shelter. That part resolved quickly. Everything else took the full 5 seconds. Then he turned, walked back into the garage, grabbed the waterproof emergency kit from its peg by the door. He kept it there for exactly no particular reason, and every reason, and put on the high-vis safety vest he kept folded over the same peg. He did not let himself think further. Thinking further was usually the mechanism by which people talked themselves out of necessary things. He jogged out onto the shoulder, into the rain, into the dark. The first truck that passed him gave no indication that its driver noticed a man in a yellow vest was standing on the shoulder of a highway. The second one was closer, close enough, that Caleb felt the slipstream push him sideways and spent a fraction of a second recalibrating his footing. He kept moving. When he reached the car, he could see a figure inside through the rain-streaked glass. Sitting in the driver's seat, upright, but clearly not all right. He moved to the driver's window, tapped it twice, steady, not urgent, the kind of knock that said I am not a threat before anything else could be said. Sophia turned toward the window with the particular expression of someone who has been trying very hard to hold themselves together and has just been startled by a new variable. Through the rain-blurred glass, she saw a man in a yellow safety vest, a flashlight in one hand, the other raised palm outward in the universal gesture of I mean no harm. The jacket under the vest was dark with rain. His face was visible in the flashlight's upward scatter, direct, calm, focused. She lowered the window 2 inches. "Engine's dead," she said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "I called 911. They may have gotten my location." "All right," he said. "I'm Caleb. I have a garage right back there." He indicated with the flashlight. "Can you put it in neutral? I want to get you further onto the shoulder before another truck comes through." "I can't." She stopped, breathed. "I'm having contractions." A pause. Brief. The rain filled it. "How far apart?" he asked. The fact that that was his first question, not "Are you serious?" not "What do you mean?" not any of the things people said when they were stalling unlocked, something in her chest that had been sealed shut for the last 40 minutes. "About 12 minutes, she said. "Maybe less." He looked at her directly for a moment. Then he made a decision that she could see happening in real time, not performed confidence but actual internal navigation, the process of someone taking stock and choosing a direction. "Okay," he said. "Here's what we're going to do." He explained it simply and quickly. He would get into the car, put it in neutral, and steer while she kept the hazards on. Together they would get the vehicle clear of the lane. Then he would assess. He did not promise her everything would be fine. He did not say she needed to relax. He simply laid out the next 2 minutes in plain language and asked if she could do that. She said yes. She found out later that he had been nearly clipped by a semi in the process of getting to the driver's side to help steer. He had not mentioned this. She found out because there was a witness, a motorist who had finally pulled over behind them, too far back to help with the car but close enough to see the whole thing. Once the car was fully on the shoulder, he stood in the rain and looked through the engine compartment for about 90 seconds with his flashlight. Then he closed the hood. "Electrical system's gone," he said through the window. "Could be the alternator or the main harness. I can't fix it out here." He looked at her. "I don't think we should be talking about the car right now." She had known that. She had been trying not to let herself know it. "There's a hospital about 12 miles east," he said. "My truck is back at the garage. Can you walk that far with support?" She considered this honestly. "I can try." He opened the door carefully and offered his arm. He did not make it a gesture of pity. He made it a practical matter. The way you hand someone a tool. She took it. Getting Sophia from the car to the garage took 6 minutes and involved 2 contractions. She counted. So did he. Without making it obvious that he was counting, he tracked the timing and kept walking her forward at a pace that balanced speed against stability, one hand at her elbow, the other ready at her back. They moved through the rain like people with somewhere to be, and no capacity for anything other than getting there. Caleb's truck was a 10-year-old work pickup, white, with a contractor's shell over the bed. The cab was clean in the way a working vehicle is clean, nothing on the seats that wasn't supposed to be there. The floor mats worn, but not cluttered. He had the engine running and the heat on before she was fully in the seat. He made 2 calls while he backed out of the lot. The first was to Clarkfield Regional Medical Center's emergency line, speaking in the shorthand of someone who had made emergency calls before location, situation, estimated arrival, current vital signs as best he could assess them, and receiving a response that told him the ER was prepping and that an ambulance was being dispatched to meet him en route. The second call was to Dottie, brief and practical. He was fine. Ella should just sleep. Then he drove. The road was wet, and the visibility was poor. He drove with the concentrated, unemotional focus of someone for whom the correct response to danger is not adrenaline, but precision. 45 miles an hour where he might normally do 60. Reading the road 3 seconds ahead instead of 1. The windshield wipers pushed the rain back and forth, metronome. Sophia sat with one hand braced against the door panel and the other pressed against her belly. She breathed. The heater was on, and the cab smelled like motor oil and something clean underneath it, a pine air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. "How long?" she asked. "About 11 miles. A pause. "Ambulance is coming toward us. We'll meet in the middle. Maybe 6 or 7 minutes." She nodded. Then a contraction arrived, longer this time, and sharper in a way that could not be managed through breath alone, and she made a sound that was not quite controlled, a single short syllable of pain she couldn't hold back. He didn't look over. She registered this as the right choice. "Keep breathing," he said. "Steady, no performance. Long out. Don't hold it," she breathed. 3 minutes passed. Then Caleb's phone mounted on the dash showed a notification from the traffic application he used habitually when driving freight. He read it without picking up the phone. His jaw moved once. "There's an accident ahead," he said. "Highway's backed up. 3 miles. A pause. How far out is the ambulance?" He checked. "They're stuck in the same backup, coming the other direction." The rain intensified. Sophia turned her head toward the window. She looked at the slick black road ahead, the red dots of stopped taillights piling up in the distance, the rain erasing everything past that point. "How bad is the backup?" she asked. He did not lie to her. "Bad." Another contraction. 8 minutes since the last one, and climbing faster now. "Caleb," she said, and her voice was careful in the particular way of someone choosing to remain calm against every instinct that is telling them not to. "I need you to understand that I might not make it to the hospital." He had already understood this. He had understood it approximately 90 seconds ago and had been in the process of deciding what to do about it. "Pull over," she said. "Pull over and call them back." He pulled onto the shoulder beneath an overpass, a narrow stretch of relative shelter from the rain. Concrete overhead, the world reduced to the width of the shoulder and the interior of a cab that had suddenly become the most important room in the world. He called the hospital back immediately. Got the attending on duty. Explained the situation in the flat. Clinical shorthand of someone reporting facts without panic. The attending spoke to him quickly and directly, and he listened and then said, "I understand," and ended the call. He turned in his seat to face Sophia. "They're going to walk me through it," he said. "The attending is staying on the line. The ambulance is still coming, they're working around the backup. Have you ever?" She stopped, breathed. "Have you ever done this?" "No," he said. "But I'm not going to pretend that matters right now." Something in the way, he said it, the complete absence of reassurance, as performance, the strange and necessary honesty of it, steadied her in a way she would later describe as inexplicable. He was not telling her it was going to be fine. He was telling her that he was here, and he was paying attention, and he was not going to stop doing either of those things, and somehow that was more than fine. He organized the back seat methodically, working with what he had, which was a first aid kit. A clean work shirt still in its packaging from an auto supply store run 3 days ago, and a thermal emergency blanket he kept behind the seat. He placed his phone where both of them could see it. The hospital's attending still on the line, the connection held through sheer insistence and whatever cell signal the overpass managed to preserve. She guided him when she could. He asked direct questions and listened to the answers, and to the voice on the phone in equal measure. Outside, the rain continued without concern for any of it. The contractions were now 5 minutes apart. Then 3. He kept talking to her, not comfort talk, not the automated sympathetic language of someone filling silence, but actual words about actual things. What she needed to do, what was happening, what came next. She answered him between breaths. The attending's voice, thin through the phone speaker, provided guidance in real time, and Caleb translated it into simpler sentences without losing the meaning. At 12 minutes past midnight, in the cab of a white work pickup on the shoulder of a highway in the rain, a sound emerged that was not the weather. It was thin and insistent and entirely new to the world. Caleb held the infant with the careful, fixed attention of someone who understood that he was holding something irreplaceable. His hands were completely steady. He looked at the baby, then looked at Sophia, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. The attending's voice came through the phone asking for confirmation. "She's here," Caleb said. "She's crying." The attending exhaled. "Good. Keep them warm. Ambulance is 4 minutes out." He wrapped the infant in the work shirt and then the thermal blanket and placed her in Sophia's arms, adjusting the angle of her hold without making it a correction, just a practical improvement. Sophia looked down at the child with the expression of someone who has just arrived somewhere they didn't know they were trying to reach. 4 minutes, Caleb said quietly. She nodded. She was crying, and she didn't stop, and she didn't try to. The ambulance arrived at 12:17. 2 paramedics, a gurney, practiced hands and quick voices, and the organized machinery of emergency medicine taking over from the improvised kind. They loaded Sophia quickly, assessed the infant, and called ahead to the hospital with updated vitals. One of the paramedics, a tall woman with red hair pulled back under her cap, stopped before she climbed into the ambulance and looked at Caleb. "You did this?" she said. Not a question. She had read the situation already. "The attending walked me through it," he said. She shook her head slowly. "The attending told you what to do. You did it. Those are not the same thing." She looked at him for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. "You kept her calm. That matters. That's actually most of it." He nodded once. He was very cold. Sophia was on the gurney, the infant on her chest, oxygen being fitted. She turned her head and found Caleb standing in the rain at the edge of the ambulance's interior light, his vest still on, his jacket soaked through, his face showing nothing in particular except that he was still there. She opened her mouth, whatever she intended to say, and she had something, clearly. It moved across her face like weather. Before she could form it was interrupted by a wave of exhaustion so total that it simply took her under. Her eyes closed. The paramedics were already moving. The doors closed. The ambulance pulled away. Caleb stood alone on the shoulder of the highway while the rain continued. Then he turned and walked back toward his truck and drove back to the garage and sat in the plastic chair near the entrance for a while before he started cleaning up. He did not think much about it in the days that followed. This was not repression, it was simply how he was built. Things happened. You did what the moment required. You moved forward. The truck needed detailing, which he did himself on Friday morning. He picked Ella up from school Friday afternoon, and she told him about a fight she'd witnessed at recess between two boys over a ball, relating the entire thing with the editorial authority of a 6-year-old who had been watching adults to understand how people worked. He listened seriously. Saturday was full 3 vehicles in various states of repair. Sunday was Ella's soccer practice, which he attended, and at which he stood along the sideline in the oil-stained jacket and watched his daughter run with the specific joy of someone who had not yet learned to contain herself. He heard from the hospital once a brief follow-up call from a caseworker checking that he hadn't sustained any injuries, which he hadn't. She mentioned that the mother and baby were both doing well. He said he was glad to hear it and thanked her. That was all he knew. It was not all that was happening. Sophia Bennett's emergency delivery on the side of Route 14 had been, through the account of the motorist who had witnessed part of it, and through the hospital staff who had received them, already making its way through the networks of information that move such stories. By Sunday morning, 2 regional news programs had run pieces. By Sunday evening, when Sophia, now stable, resting, the infant in a warming unit 2 floors above, was handed a phone by her assistant, who had arrived at the hospital Saturday morning with 2 colleagues, and the kind of controlled, professional concern that was particular to people who worked for her, the story had acquired the momentum of something that could not be recalled. Sophia Bennett, CEO, rescued by Good Samaritan in highway emergency. That was the gentler version. Some headlines chose to emphasize the unverified romanticism of the thing. Billionaire CEO gives birth in mechanic's truck. Others found the angle they wanted in the contrast. Unknown repairman delivers tech executive's baby on highway in rainstorm. The question of his identity had become, in the particular fever of that kind of attention, something like a puzzle. The region's press was looking. The hospital would release no identifying information. The motorist witness had seen a man in a yellow vest and a dark jacket, had not caught plates. What they knew was, male, 30s or 40s, came from a roadside garage in the vicinity of Route 14 and Old Clarkfield Road. There were 4 garages in that vicinity. The reporters found all 4 by Sunday afternoon. 3 of them, when contacted, denied any connection to the story and expressed no particular knowledge of the incident. The 4th, a single bay operation with a faded hand-painted sign and no employee on duty, when the journalists arrived, was closed and dark, with a work truck in the lot whose color and shell configuration were consistent with what the witness had described. By Monday morning, 2 camera crews were parked on the far side of the chain-link fence when Caleb Turner arrived at 7:15 to open up. He stood at the gate for a moment, looking at them. They were not aggressive, they had positioned themselves respectfully, or at least strategically. 2 reporters, 3 cameras, a satellite uplink vehicle down the road. They raised their hands in the approximate greeting of people who want something from you and know they are going to have to be polite about it. Caleb looked at them. Then he unlocked the gate, went inside, and started his coffee. He allowed, after approximately 20 minutes, one of the reporters to enter and ask questions. He answered 6 of them. He declined to be filmed. He did not deny being the person they were looking for. He declined to describe himself as a hero. The reporter asked why, and Caleb said, "Because I drove a truck," and offered no elaboration. By noon, his name was public. The story that followed had the particular shape of a thing that the culture needs periodically, a man of unremarkable appearance and unremarkable circumstances who had, through entirely unglamorous competence and without hesitation, prevented a catastrophe. The narrative filled in around him whether he participated or not. The widower, the young daughter, the failing garage, the self-taught repair work, the night alone with a stranger and a storm, and an outcome that could have been anything. Some of it was accurate. Some of it was the sentimental coloring that stories acquire when they are handled by many people quickly. What was not accurate, and what arrived with particular force, was the counter-narrative. It appeared in the way these things appear gradually at first, then all at once. An account claiming that Caleb had acted not out of instinct but calculation, that a mechanic who happened to be on a stretch of road frequented by affluent commuters and who happened to assist the CEO of a major technology firm at a moment of maximum vulnerability, was worthy of scrutiny. A post, spreading quickly, alleged without evidence that Caleb had staged or manufactured some element of the event. Another suggested he had delayed calling for help in order to extend his involvement. None of it was accompanied by evidence, because none of it had evidence. But evidence was not what drove the circulation. Caleb read one piece of it. He did not read more. He fixed a Jeep with a cracked CV joint and then started on a Subaru that needed new brake lines. At around 3 in the afternoon, Ella's teacher called to ask if everything was okay because some other parents were talking about it. Caleb said yes, everything was fine, thank you for calling. The hospital's lead attending, Dr. Marcus Webb, issued a statement the following morning. It was brief, precise, and written in the manner of someone who had decided that precision was the appropriate response to imprecision. The actions taken by the individual at the scene were medically appropriate, demonstrably effective, and consistent with proper emergency delivery protocols, as communicated over the phone by hospital staff. Any suggestion that the individual's presence or actions contributed to harm or delay was factually incorrect. The hospital considered the matter closed. The paramedic who had arrived at the scene, Sarah Brennan, the one with red hair who had spoken to Caleb, gave a brief interview to a local news program. She said, "I've been on this job for 9 years. I have seen people freeze in a crisis. I have seen people make things worse. What I saw that night was someone who looked at a terrible situation and decided to be useful. That's it. That's all it was. That should be enough. It was not enough for everyone, but it was enough for most people, and the counter-narrative ran its short, ugly course and faded." Caleb kept working. Sophia Bennett arrived at Turner's Auto Repair on a Thursday, 11 days after the delivery, at 9 in the morning. She came alone. No assistant, no car service, no communication staff. She drove herself in a rental car, a practical mid-size sedan, nothing she couldn't explain, and parked on the gravel lot outside the chain link without attracting any particular attention, because the cameras had moved on and the crowd had dissipated and Clarkfield had returned to being what it always was. She was thinner than she had been, and she moved more carefully, and she wore the expression of someone who had recently been taken apart and put back together and was still making the internal inventory of what was and was not in its right place. She was also, despite all of this, entirely herself, dressed plainly in dark clothes, hair simple, nothing about her appearance designed to communicate anything at all. Caleb was under the hood of a sedan when she walked through the gate. He heard her footsteps on the gravel and turned. They looked at each other for a moment. He wiped his hands on a shop rag and came out from behind the car. He stood with the natural stillness of someone who did not fill silence reflexively. She came forward and stopped about 3 feet away. "I don't know what to say," she said. "I've been trying to figure out what to say for 11 days. I kept coming up with the wrong things." "You don't have to say anything," he said. "I do, though." She looked at him steadily. "You know who I am now." "I knew something was unusual that night," he said. "I didn't know the specifics." "Does it matter to you, the specifics?" He considered this briefly. "No." She was quiet for a moment. Around them, the gravel ticked under the wind. Somewhere up the highway, a truck downshifted. "I was running," she said, "that night, not from anything specific, just from the weight of it. I had 47 unopened messages on my phone and a board review in 36 hours, and I had been in a building for 16 days without seeing anything that wasn't a screen or a conference table, and she stopped. I drove. I don't do that. I don't do things without a plan." Caleb said nothing. He was listening, and that was enough. "My daughter's name is Mia," Sophia said. "She's doing well. She was 4 weeks early, but she's doing very well." She paused. "She's small. She stopped again, and something moved through her face that was not a professional thing at all. "She's extraordinary." "I'm glad," he said. "I want to help you," she said. "I know that's the part where this gets complicated. I know how it sounds. A person with resources shows up and offers something, and there's a power dynamic baked into that which makes it hard to receive." She was watching him. "I'm not trying to buy what happened that night. I don't think what happened that night is purchasable. I'm not a fool about money. Which means I know exactly what money cannot do." Caleb was still. He was looking at her with the direct, neutral attention he gave to most things present but unperformed. "I want to help expand the garage," she said. "An additional bay. Equipment. A proper lift. I can do that through a business investment rather than a gift, if you prefer the framing. The money is not the point. The point is," she paused, "the point is that this place should not be struggling." He was quiet for long enough that she began to wonder if he had simply decided not to answer. "I appreciate that," he said finally. "Genuinely. But I can't take it." She had expected this. "Why?" "Because I'd spend every day wondering if people who came through that gate were coming because of me or because of you. And my daughter would ask why things changed. And I'd have to explain it to her. And I'd have to explain it to myself. And the explanation would always be that someone gave me something I didn't earn." He looked at her. "What I did that night, I didn't do that for anything. If I take something for it, it changes what it was." Sophia stood with that for a moment. "That's a very pure position," she said. "It's a practical one," he said. "I can't work from something I don't trust." She looked at him for a long moment. Not evaluating, or not only evaluating. There was something else in it that was closer to recognition, the kind that happens when you meet someone whose architecture you understand, because it is in some essential way like your own. "All right," she said. "I'm going to respect that." He nodded. "But I'm going to ask you something," she said. He waited. "Can I give you my phone number?" "Not for anything. Just if something changes. Or if you ever need something. Or if Ella needs something." She said the name carefully, aware that she had done her research and that he would know it. "Or for nothing at all. Just so it exists." A pause. "All right," he said. The months that followed did not change Caleb's life in any dramatic or visible way. The garage was still the garage. The sign still said Turner's in rust-orange paint. He was still there in the morning before anyone else arrived, still closing after everyone else had left, still doing the work in the particular, unhurried, precise way he had always done it. What changed was quieter than that. The first indication was a phone call from a woman named Patricia Lowe, who told him she had heard about his shop through a friend and was looking for someone trustworthy to handle maintenance on her family's vehicles, 3 cars, regular service. He said he could take them. She thanked him. The second was a man named David Hargrove, who arrived in a late-model truck and said he'd been told Caleb was the best electrical diagnostic mechanic in the county. Caleb said he didn't know about that. David said he was going to find out, and handed over the truck. There were more. Not overwhelming, not in a wave, but steady. A dozen new regulars over 3 months. A small article in a local business publication about the garage, placed without Caleb's involvement and without mentioning anything that had happened on Route 14. A contract to handle fleet maintenance for a local delivery company. Word of mouth that spread with the particular slow dependability of a reputation that is earned rather than manufactured. Caleb did not connect the dots publicly. He understood, privately, that someone had connected them for him, not through money, not through announcement, but through the quieter machinery of genuine relationships and well-placed trust. He filed this away without comment. He hired his first employee in March, a young man named Marcus, 21, a semester shy of his own technical certificate, who reminded Caleb of himself in the specific way of someone who was better at this work than they had yet been told. He paid Marcus fairly, which meant he worked marginally longer hours at the outset to cover it, which was fine. He had always been better at managing his time than at managing his feelings about it. Ella noticed the changes in the way children notice things not through analysis, but through the accumulation of small observations that they store without labeling. Her father had something more like energy now. He laughed a little more easily. He stopped looking at the garage accounts with the particular expression he used when he was doing arithmetic that worried him. One Saturday in late April, she sat on the plastic chair near the entrance and watched Marcus and her father work on a transmission, and she said to no one in particular, in the manner of children delivering observations to the general air, "My dad is really good at this." Caleb heard it from under the vehicle. He stayed where he was, but something in the quality of his stillness changed. Sophia came back in June. On a Tuesday morning, she brought Mia, who was 4 months old by then, and who regarded the world with the sovereign, weightless openness of very young people who have not yet been told that anything is ordinary. She wore a striped cotton hat that was slightly too large for her head and was apparently undisturbed by this. Sophia had called ahead. She arrived in the same rental car. She carried Mia in a carrier against her chest and stood in the lot with the particular quality of someone who has arrived at a place that matters and is not in a hurry. Caleb came out. He looked at Mia for a moment. "She looks like you," he said. "People keep saying that," Sophia said. "I think she looks like herself. That's probably the more accurate assessment." They stood in the June morning with the easy, uncomplicated quiet of two people who had reached the far shore of something enormous and arrived, somehow, without the ceremony that such arrivals usually require. Mia made a small, unprompted sound. "She's been doing that," Sophia said. "She does it when she's pleased about something." "What is she pleased about?" he asked. Sophia looked at the garage the new lift Marcus had installed, the second bay they'd opened up after a business loan Caleb had applied for and received on the strength of his improved accounts. The sign that still said Turner's but was now straight and freshly painted in the same rust orange it had always been, because he had decided that was who they were, and there was no reason to change the color. "I have no idea," Sophia said. "She doesn't explain herself." Caleb almost smiled. It was a movement at the corner of his mouth. Brief, the kind that didn't perform itself. Ella came running out from behind the garage, where she had been helping Marcus inflate tires, which was her current preferred task. She stopped when she saw the baby. She looked up at Sophia, then back at the baby, with the rigorous assessment of a 6-year-old deciding whether a situation was going to be interesting. "Is that your baby?" she asked Sophia. "This is Mia," Sophia said. "Yes." Ella looked at her father. "Did you help?" "A little," he said. Ella appeared to find this an entirely satisfactory answer. She looked at Mia for another moment, then said, "She can come back whenever she wants," and went back to the tires. Sophia looked at Caleb. He looked at her. There were things between them now, not romantic things, not yet the shape of any particular narrative, but something more essential than those, the shared knowledge of a night neither of them would explain fully to anyone else, the debt that one of them kept refusing and the other kept trying to find the right form for, the tentative and slowly accumulating architecture of two people who had decided to know each other without having planned to. The highway behind the garage was bright in the June light. No rain, no emergency, just the regular sound of the world moving through its ordinary business, carrying people from one place to another, most of them unknown to each other, most of them passing without stopping. Caleb Turner stood in the light outside the garage he had built and maintained, and nearly lost and was still building, with his daughter behind him and the morning ahead of him, and did not look like anything in particular except what he was. That, as it turned out, was more than enough.